Oh, hey, sit down. I was just about to read a story before work, you know? It's one of those Aesop fables we'd hear as kids. Something about a city mouse, country mouse, and computer mouse? Alright. Clearly, exposition does not work in this series, so screw the intro! Let's just get to the anime girls. As we speak, two of my favorite modern IP are in the "we're so back" phase of the internet hype cycle. Chainsawman got a movie, a season 2 tease, and the promise of an impending end to its second half. Then, on the other side of the ocean, after nearly 10 long years of their own subtle, silent buildup, the girls of the Literature Club are finally back with a mobile port. Anyways, with both of these series re-entering the old headspace at the same time, I couldn't help but find myself dreaming up this weird comparison of Monika versus Makima. Their stories are just so weirdly similar, both ultimately telling tales of love as we follow this descent towards a strange, misunderstood power that tragically culminates in a final confrontation against an all-powerful being who could erase their very reality from existence. So, I'll be honest, not only do I think this digital deathmatch just vibes super hard, but it's also a topic that helps answer a ton of big questions about both characters. Why do these enigmatic figures do what they do? How would their mysterious powers interact with other worlds? And let's just be real for a second, you and I both know these fandoms are only here to find out what happens when an unstoppable waifu-killing force meets the immovable waifu-killing object. And you know what? I want to find out too. Okay, so to seriously get into this, I think the biggest thing you need to understand with Makima versus Monika are the players involved, as both girls fight almost entirely using one hyper-specific ability to defeat 99% of people they're pitted up against. Honestly, this isn't really a matchup that can end with a who punches harder or who has the bigger number answer. So I'm just gonna need you to bear with me a little bit today while I yap about the oh-so-boring concepts of plot or mindset, which might usually just seem like filler added for those sweet YouTube mid-rolls, because those things are basically the sole deciding factor for a topic like this. But saying all that is trying to make a very long story far too short. So to really get the full picture, we've gotta go all the way back to 2017, where hit indie horror darling Doki Doki Literature Club first began, built on its simple but terrifying premise. What would happen if a fictional character was alive and had the power to do something about it? In this game, we follow the Literature Club and its 4 members, Monika, Sayori, Yuri, and Natsuki, as they compete for the affection of our no-name protagonist, usually just dubbed MC, in what looks like a cheerful pastel dating sim, until slowly but surely, something begins to go wrong. A mysterious force pulls the strings until our once happy tone cheesy romance game collapses into pure psychological terror. Chainsawman is similarly, at its core, a story about love and family. Denji, our protagonist, has neither. He's poor, isolated, and barely human. The guy's whole narrative is so on the nose that he's physically selling parts of his body to show how he isn't whole. That is at least until Makima enters his life and gives him everything. A job, a purpose, and something that looks a whole lot like family. From then on, Denji becomes inwardly obsessed with chasing the promise of a happy, exciting life. But just like with MC, tragedy strikes as an unseen hand tugs against the chains of his world until it all comes crashing down with a boom. Around the same halfway point in both stories, our leading ladies reveal that they were, in fact, the ones secretly destroying our protagonist's chances at a happy ending. And their grand reason for such a thing? Well, they did it for love. Or at least a faux love. You see, Makima never really loved Denji. She loved Chainsawman. In a world where every fear or concept is given an associated devil, like the fear of tomatoes creating the aptly named Tomato Devil, Chainsawman and his unique ability to devour devils, erasing them or their concept from existence, served as a chaotic power that fascinated Makima. Despite the real Chainsaw Man, Pochita, ultimately being the opposite of this idyllic hero of hell she once envisioned. And similarly, Monika doesn't really love the player either. While she does break the game itself to be with you, what she actually wants is to be you, in your reality, to be a real person not trapped inside a game. Conceptually, to bring things back around to the intro, I think that's why the mouse analogy works so well here. In the story of Chainsaw Man, we're retold one of Aesop's ancient Greek fables about the city and country mouse. The city mouse lives a life of luxury and excitement, but is constantly in danger, while the country mouse lives modestly, without excess joy, but far more safety. Chainsaw Man plays with the morality of these ideas through characters like Denji, Rize, and later Asa. But this third concept of the computer mouse almost perfectly contextualizes Makima and Monika's roles in their story. A computer mouse doesn't eat, it doesn't live, it doesn't need happiness. It's only really a mouse in name alone, and its sole purpose is to manipulate a world beneath it. It's merely a conduit for someone else to control something. That feeling of isolation, being fundamentally different from the world around them, defines both Makima and Monika. All they truly want is an equal, to be a real mouse of any kind. That's probably why both of their stories end, with Monika and Makima giving their powers to a new girl for the protagonist to save and cherish despite them inevitably failing to do so, but that part's not important for this. Like I said, the only reason my silly little plot recap matters here today is because the abilities these girls use are deeply influenced by their shared, twisted perception of the world. So much so that knowing how each girl perceives the other is basically your answer for who would win. The easiest way I know how to explain the concept, though, is simply by starting with the more blatant of the duo, through Makima herself. More specifically, understanding her unique powers as the Control Devil. Makima was one of 4 apocalyptic horsemen that all share a similar power to exert control over things. And as the series repeatedly shows us, anyone these horsemen view as lesser than themselves will also fall under that thing umbrella, having complete control enacted over them like living marionettes. Crucially, this power has nothing to do with someone's actual physical strength, but instead it's entirely based on how Makima perceives her target. While this idea used to be a lot more contentious back in the day, after Chainsaw Man Part 2 explored the story of Makima's sister Yoru, we have a much better idea about how the Horseman's control power works. For example, in a few of Yoru's fights as the War Devil, she was either tricked or tricked someone else into playing a game of rock, paper, scissors. When she won these games, she casually turned top tiers of the franchise into literal coat racks. And in the scenarios where she lost, Yoru outright couldn't enact her war powers anymore, despite physically defeating her target, because she perceived herself as losing that game. And this is why Makima's perspective matters so much here. Because a hypothetical bloodlusted Makima, who would theoretically perceive herself as absolutely superior to everyone for an optimal fighting mindset, should, quite frankly, solo most of fiction. The Control Devil's power arguably borders on manipulating the literal concept of control itself. Because, again, Chainsaw Man's devils aren't just magic monsters. They fully embody their concept and physically grow in power as their very idea becomes more revered. That's why when Chainsaw Man chowed down on the Ear Devil, for example, ears as a whole just stopped existing. The very memory of ears was erased from history. So, as you can imagine, when Denji's power extends to eating fundamental concepts like death itself, even if Makima could only manipulate her singular concept of control to a similar level as Chainsaw Man's erasure, it would still have to be absolutely insane. To the point that if Makima genuinely believed someone like Goku was lesser than her, she might unironically just control him. Not because she's stronger, but because she believes it. These same ideas play into the reason why she couldn't beat Chainsawman, as Makima idolized him too much to control. But even when Makima can't directly neg her opponent, she still has an absurd collection of other abilities from the devils she's already conquered that make her an incredibly competent fighter. She can see the future with the Future Devil, can travel across dimensions with the Spider Devil, raise the dead with the Zombie Devil, and maybe most notably of her devil contracts, her deal with the Angel Devil allows Makima to trade lifespan in exchange for powerful weapons. While this might seem a little underwhelming at first glance, these creation weapons can be made with a lot of wonky properties, like creating a sword that could cut ghosts. So if you're fighting someone who can't be conventionally face-punched like a Gojo or GER, Angel's power is a solid catch-all to argue even if Makima can't do the face-punching herself, she might just make a weapon that can. But beyond even all that, Makima's most impactful ability, true to her character, isn't some flashy devil pact, it's her contract with the Japanese Prime Minister. Unlike most devils in Chainsawman, who use blood to heal, Makima was able to bypass this restriction with a deal through the government, using a contract that simply states any attack done to Makima will instead be transferred to a random Japanese citizen. Meaning, unless every pawn on her entire game board drops, Makima can't take damage. And since her story takes place in a retelling of our own world during the real-life time frame of 1997, that's 126 million Japanese citizen one-ups for Makima to use. And yet, somehow, despite all those insane powers, Makima isn't even a slouch in straight hands either. It's just the least important thing she can do. Powerful devils, like the Gun Devil, capable of blowing holes through mountains, tearing through entire cities with ease, and firing bullets said on panel to move at Mach 1400 speeds, casually gets off-screened by Makima in around 12 seconds. She also clashed with the highest tiers in the verse, like the Primordial Fears or Black Chainsawman himself. And while she does view such fights as unwinnable, she was still able to damage and contest these top-tier entities. Which is wild when you consider that Makima's sister Yoru once turned the entire Statue of Liberty into a gun, fired it across the planet Earth at near light speed, and that mountain-busting attack barely phased a primal fear like the Aging Devil. Meanwhile, Makima just pointing at similar fears makes them start writhing in pain and agony. Although anything above that city to mountain level range for Makima gets a lot more debatable, at least for now, as after Yoru regains the full power of gun-toting, God-fearing Americans to become the new strongest devil, fighting a massively amped Dinjita Chainsawman, that duo was destroying countries, one-shotting primal fears, and trying to yank the moon out of the sky like their Dragon Ball characters. Stuff Makima realistically can't scale to off of her one fight with the heavily nerfed Black Chainsawman. I guess you could still hype her to her sister's level narratively, especially with Fujimoto's old World Eater Nayuta one-shot and statements about primal fears threatening the world, but that's definitely pushing it. The reason I've hyped up Makima so much today, though, is because a lot of what I've said about her perception, control, and narrative power really helps to understand the other side of this mirror in Monika. Within the world of Doki Doki, Monika is so powerful because she's been granted something called Monitor Kernel Access. This elevated permission level allows her to view DDLC for what it is, an artificial simulation. And because of that, she can manipulate every aspect of her world through a coding interface. What most people miss about Monika's power, though, is that they stop right there. They see her break the fourth wall, talk about Steam, Twitter, and freaking OBS, then write her off as being a literal computer program. Some bonsai buddy looking clippy level character who fundamentally doesn't work in versus debates. And I'm sure a lot of people walked into this fight assuming Makima would just sort of unplug Monika's PC and call it a day. But, like with Makima herself, the problem of that idea lies in perception. Because the entire narrative of Doki Doki Literature Club is about rejecting the idea that Monika's world is just a game. The biggest example of this is found in the DDLC Plus expansion, through secret developer emails written by the company who, in lore, created the Dokis, called Metaverse Enterprise Solutions. In these emails, it's said again and again that the girls and world they created are indeed real, to the point of raising ethical concerns about their sentience and outright claiming there's no difference between our universe and the simulated one of the Literature Club. So what could possibly make Metaverse employees believe something like this? And well, it's because that was the point of creating DDLC. The Literature Club wasn't designed to be a game. It was made as a test. A simulated universe designed to observe how people act inside a simulation, to determine if we too might be simulated. But to Monika, Sayori, Yuri, Natsuki, the Literature Club is a real physical place. And this idea is constantly reflected throughout Monika's character arc, with her initially believing she's more important than the other girls. She can see the fourth wall. They can't. She wants to believe what we believed, that her world is fake, just a game, because then maybe she'd be special enough to escape it. But that belief is proven wrong. Monika's world isn't something fake that she could run from. Her friends, her life, and the consequences of her decisions ultimately are real, at least as real as anyone's choices. I genuinely can't hammer this point home hard enough. Monika sings a whole entire song about this plot point, and all of Act 4 only exists to show you that even if another girl got the fourth wall awareness instead of Monika, they'd behave just like her. Because the Dokis were always just as sentient as she was. They simply had a different perspective. We could really go on about this all day. The game of Doki Doki is always showing you that its world is far more tangible than the visual novel aesthetic lets on. The horror of DDLC works precisely because of how real their world is. The girls decay, they die, they experience suffering not like programs, but like people. And once all those pieces click into place, you can finally start to understand the scope of what Monika is really controlling here. As almost all evidence points to Monika manipulating a fully simulated 3-dimensional universe, complete with time, causality, and conscious beings. And that's the key, because if Monika can control one simulated 3D universe, then there's no reason why her powers can't be measured the same way against any other universe. This interpretation, that you can and should power scale Monika to understand her character, is something directly supported by the plot itself. When Paula Miner, one of the Metaverse devs, directly compares Monika's power to real-world concepts in our universe. And surprise, surprise, Paula doesn't give us some 12-hour lecture about Monika's power scaling being pointless. She plainly states, Monika's power is totally unrealistic for anything in our universe to possess, to the point that she wants to study how being the strongest impacted Monika's life on some Suguru Ghetto type deal, which obviously has to imply you can compare Monika to a real 3D world in the first place. And now we've even sort of seen what happens firsthand when you throw Monika into a new world, thanks to, I kid you not, the mobile version. As despite Monika's desktop-related fourth wall gimmicks like mouse control obviously not working in a mobile world, inevitably she just adapts, replacing her old cursor glitches with brand new CAPTCHA tests, and finding different ways to troll her beloved MC no matter where she's been put. But Look, I know I've been going on and on about why Monika's powers should definitely 100% totally work on real physical characters, so let's just get to the point. What can Monika's powers even do that was worth so much buildup? And well, to put it plainly, Monika's code hacks cover a lot of the same things that Makima does. Letting Monika teleport, create things, or even use a lesser control style ability to alter people's minds via their character files. In DDLC, each girl's entire existence was kept within a single fictional file type called .chr. Monika's access meant she could fiddle with these files very easily, which is how she sent her friends off the deep end to do all the crazy things we see in the main story. And if that all ever got too much for her, Monika could just delete them, erasing the file and associated character from existence. And while it's fair to say that Makima herself probably wouldn't have a character file, these files are still important in versus matchups, since Monika does have one. So if you don't have a special ability to destroy something baked into the code of reality, Monika pretty much can't die. Anytime she's taken damage or needed to fix something, Monika just reloads some files, then is good as new. This invulnerability also complements Monika's other major ability to control space-time itself. We've seen her use this ability to rewind time at a whim if things ever went wrong, as well as a more extreme version we saw in Act 3, where Monika straight up dismantles everything in reality aside from one classroom, breaking the game down so thoroughly that she says time itself is no longer passing. Saving the game doesn't work, you can't fast forward text anymore, and Monika's Act 3 poem blatantly calls this place a crumbling world of infinite choices where nothing ends. These are all really solid statements showing off Monika's ability to tear apart what's effectively a universe, while casually tampering with the literal flow of time. And of course, anyone who's played DDLC past that point also obviously knows about Monika's very best feat, which is, funnily enough, the same musical number I mentioned before, where Monika sings about her dramatic character arc whilst systematically deleting everything the game has to offer until nothing is left. A feat that those same emailers from before mention Monika has already done to at least 5 other universes in the past. Ensuring this acceptance and cosmic destruction is her canon ending. So, surprisingly, for two characters who themselves are so complex, with nigh limitless pools of abilities to pull from, the winner here really only hinges on one thing. If Makima perceives Monika as a regular human, Monika would lose. But if Makima hesitates, viewing Monika as a threat, then instead, she would lose. Cause despite Makima's vast arsenal, she can't really do anything in a straight fight against someone with so many feats of altering time or reality. Sure, she's much physically stronger and faster than Monika. The poor gal's only got the physical stats of a normal schoolgirl after all, but simply punching a hole through Monika isn't going to be enough to put her down through a character file. Very similar to Makima's own contract with the Prime Minister. Maybe she could make an angel weapon to cut through Monika's character file, but doing so implies Makima already had time to figure out the hard way that Monika isn't going down. And by that point, it's probably too late to stop the time freeze universe erase combo. So yeah, it all really comes down to control versus delete. And fortunately, I think Chainsawman gives a pretty detailed answer as to who Makima will and won't control. Makima, at heart, is a desperate character, always looking for an equal match. Even when put up against devils so weak she could blitz and one-shot them like Rize, Makima always goes out of her way to thoroughly stomp them before control, as proof to herself that she really is superior. This flaw is the sole reason Makima's plan fails in the original manga to begin with. It's well established before the final battle that Makima physically sees all humans as dogs. It's why she instantly controls human characters without fighting them, unlike the devils and hybrids. That's why, during the final battle, Denji gambled everything on the fact that Makima, emotionally and literally, would never see him as anything from the start. And wouldn't you know it, Denji was right. Makima was always so busy dealing with Chainsawman, she never saw Denji until it was too late. So basically, if Monika was the real human girl she always wanted to be, then Makima would no-diff conceptual mind hacks her instantly. But when viewed as she truly is, Makima wouldn't see a mouse of any kind. And unfortunately, that perception, her own misgivings and selfish desire to fight for a true equal, means Makima is hard-coded to lose this matchup. Maybe though, the control devil losing to someone who chases that equal, hug-filled life just as much as she does really is the best ending for both of them. Just please, leave out the sushi this time. And that's all for today. Thanks, everyone.